Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Brent Aiken, David Pruitt, and Russell Martin. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, Russell Martin.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. My name is Russell Martin. I am your host for this week. And we are so excited to be back with you. And one of the things that we want to let you know, take time and make sure and do, go follow us on social media at Talk Student Men. Go check out the website, studentministryconversations.org, because there's lots of different episodes. I think we're now up to 120 or something like that. Bunch of episodes that we've talked with student leaders, student ministry leaders from all over, and all walks of life and all different situations. Some who've been here for a little bit, some who've been doing this for a long time. And so all that wisdom is collected on this one site. And so it's a great place for you to go check it out. You'll hear more conversations just like ours today. But at Talk Student Men and studentministryconversations.org, go check those out. And while you're there, wherever you're listening on this, if you would subscribe, follow all of the things that they tell you to do. Make sure and go do those things. So I am glad to be with you back. It's been a couple of weeks, and we are trying some brand new things. So we have a new podcast recorder right now, and a new service we're using. And so hopefully this will all work out. And we're testing it out with things that may or may not work and things that may or may not fail. We're testing it out with Adrian, and Adrian is a friend of mine. I've known Adrian for, a long time. We kind of were cross paths for a little bit, and then we've been completely separate for a while. But he has been doing youth ministry. He also is a comedian, which sometimes those go together. You know, probably always had the class clown, and you kind of grew up to do this for a living.
That's right.
And so we're going to kind of talk just comedy. We're going to talk youth ministry. And we kind of decided in the last minute, we're going to get into some youth ministry fails and successes. So it won't be just the things that we've done wrong. But someone said one time, if you're an expert, it just means that you've failed more than most people, and you've gotten back up and figured out how to do that. So Adrian, before we get started with kind of diving into the episode, why don't you tell us about you and where you, as much or as little as you want to share, where you've been, where you've come from, how you got to where you are right now.
Okay. Let's see. Let's backtrack it here. I'm originally from South Texas. Now, wherever south you're thinking, go further south. So people think San Antonio. I'm 4 hours south of San Antonio in the Rio Grande Valley, down along the border, down there. I was born in a town called Harlingen, Texas. So, and then raised all along there in McAllen, and I graduated high school from Mission, Texas. So, spent my upbringing down in the Rio Grande Valley, and then I moved after high school to San Antonio. And so San Antonio is where I got my start into the world of stand-up comedy. I went right out of high school. So I got a head start in college. I started taking night classes my junior year of high school. My dad was actually a college professor, and so he was kind of encouraging me to jump ahead. So I already was working on my associates when I graduated high school almost. And so whenever I graduated high school finally, my dad kind of sat me down. He says, "Son, what do you want to do in this life?" And I said, "This may really, really shock you, but I said, but I want to be a stand-up comic." And I was really like fearing that my dad was just going to go, "Absolutely not. You're going to stay in school." And he didn't. He said, "You know what?" He says, "My money is a terrible thing to waste." He says, "So if you want to go and be a stand-up comedian," he says, "go and chase that." He says, "because college is always going to be there. You can always come back. You can always find interest in things later." And so he says, "Don't be wasting my money with school when you don't know what you want to do." And so right out of high school, I packed up my bags and I moved to San Antonio, and I was working 3 jobs and going to the comedy club every night, like every struggling comedian was. And I used to go to open mic nights. That's how I got my start was bombing, going on stage and just completely eating it for 3-4 minutes, and it was just absolutely I'd go on there with my work shirt and my name tag and everything, and then have to turn around and go work a shift somewhere else. And but eventually made a lot of friends in the business, and ended up having the right people in. And this is 2010, and then in 2012 I got signed professionally doing stand-up, and the stars just kind of fell in line for me, and I got to quit my job, and that was the most like nerve-wracking thing on the planet. Was I was working a really stable job at HEB, and I was a man. Now this is how I love HEB to death, but this is how you know that they don't know what they're doing, is that they had me in management before I made this jump. So I went on the road, and from 2012 I signed a 3-year contract with my agency. So in 2012, July 2012, I signed this contract from July 2012 to July 2015, and it was 3 years, and that we signed, and it was. They gave me an agent. They gave me a CPA. They gave me, a photographer. They gave me they gave somebody that dresses me, because apparently I didn't dress well. So they had somebody coordinate my outfits. And then literally the next week, my phone just started blowing up, and it was plane tickets. It was where I'm going. And like this, I was flying to states, to cities I've never even heard of, and working with people that I could have never imagined in my life. And it all just changed overnight. And so I went ahead and I lived that life. I was on the road for those 3 years. I was on the road over 280 days a year for those 3 straight years, nonstop, and invested in it. Went to 28 states and 13 countries in 3 years. And eventually it just got to the point where I just got tired. I just knew that I said, I love comedy, but I just knew that I wanted something else. I had no downtime. I had no relationships. I had no friends, and I just knew God was pulling me somewhere else. And so I eventually got a job offer to be in youth ministry. And so it worked out by the pastor at that church saw me at a show one night, and she came up to me, and she had one of those laughs that you just want to take with you, like you just love it. Like, and she was, of course, she was drunk off her mind, but no, just kidding. But no, she came up and she said, you know what, this is gonna sound weird, but she's like, but you're gonna be the next youth director at my church. And so
all right, okay, I don't normally interrupt, but usually it's like, okay, if someone's leading camp, then a pastor sees them, or someone's leading worship, and I've had those conversations. I've had people come up to me and go, "You did a great job at camp. How would you like to come to our church?" I've had those conversations, but this was from a comedy show.
This is from a comedy show, straight up. As a matter of fact, it was a brewery downtown San Antonio. Her and her husband were there, and she heard my set. Now, backtrack it real quick. In my routine, my routine's always been clean. So I've always worked a clean set. But number 2 is the fact that I mentioned that I was a Christian in my act, and I grew up Methodist. So I talked about, I think at the time I was doing a joke about how the Methodist sacraments that we have is we have baptism, communion, and potlucks. And so, and I think I was talking about, but I also talked about how I hated potlucks and how they terrify me, because when you're raised with old people and you go to an old people church, potlucks are never a good thing. So is that
you always want to know who made what, so you can get that when you first go in.
And that old people they have nothing else better to do but just get creative with their dishes, and it absolutely terrifies me. So I stand in line at a potluck and I just stare at their dish for 5 minutes, and I just watch it jiggle, and I'm just thinking, is this what I want? So needless to say, she heard me, and she came up, and it was just that quick. She says, "This is going to sound dumb." She said, "But you're going to be my next." She's like, "You're going to be my next youth director. Here's my card." She hands it to me. She says, "You have the job. I'm not even going to interview you." And she's like, "Just come by." And so she said, "Pray about it, think about it, and let me know." And this is literally my introduction to youth ministry. And so 2 days later, I came knocking, and I went, and it was this little tiny church outside of San Antonio called Helotes Hills, and so I go out there and I meet her, and I see this church, and I said, "Great, yeah, I think this will be fun. Let me meet the kids." And she says, "Oh, that's the best part. There is none." And she says,
You can only go up from there.
she's like, "This is why I can hire you, because there is nothing to gauge on." She's like, "There's never been a youth ministry here." She says, "This is a church full of old people and potlucks." And she's like, "And we need that younger crowd in here. So you have a blank, drawing board on this, and you can have fun with it and get creative." And she said, "I know you can do that." So
interesting.
And so I got in, and I went head on, man. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what my direction was. So I started, first thing I did was I called my old youth directors when I was growing up in middle school. And, after they unblocked my number and realized that I was in youth, like that I needed help, and I apologized to them profusely, because I was not the greatest kid in my youth group. When I told them I was in youth ministry, they laughed, and they said, "You know what?" They said, "This is going to be great. You're going to be great at it." And so, and they recommended the biggest bit of advice they had was to network. They say, reach out to other youth pastors who know more than you. And so I became and I was like, well, I was in comedy to where I networked with everybody there. So I said, in youth ministry, I'm just going to network with everybody. And so boom, 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 boom. And I started networking, making friends, and I started going to conferences and just diving in. And then soon, and lo and behold, I fell in love with it, and it just became my life, and it became everything that the ministry that God had planned out just for me. Yeah. And so ever since then, I went there, and I went to full-time to Palestine, and that's when we met. I was serving in Palestine. And then from there, I had taken a full-time job back in San Antonio. I met my wife in Palestine, and then from there, we went to San Antonio. We got married, and then we came to Conroe. So Conroe, Texas is where the story leads off in. But that's the whole venture into youth ministry. Was I wish I could say I had this amazing calling at camp, and the Lord put himself on. It was not like that at all.
Well, but I think that's important, because the call doesn't have to be altar call at camp and God called you forth. Like, God calls different people from different places at different times. Absolutely. And usually when you most least expect something like that to happen.
100%.
So I can definitely see that. I'm gonna go back to a couple of things that you mentioned. One was, problem is my handwriting is awful. So I read things when you're going, and I'm like, one was, I was listening to a comedian talk about knowing when you're a professional. So are you professional whenever you can get paid just for you, when you can quit your other jobs? Is that the
well, okay, so, sort of. There's people will get $20 and a ham sandwich and call themselves a comedian. So I mean, it really just kind of depends on the circumstances. I told myself the day that I was a comedian was the day that I had to turn it into the IRS that I was a comedian, because I made too much money. So that right there, and I still have to do that. I still do comedy shows, and the IRS loves me, and you get a 1099 for comedy, and you get your youth ministry. It's like, boom, you got a nonprofit and definitely a for-profit. Let's just
I think it's funny, because I have a couple of CDs I've done, and I have some songs that are on Spotify. Yeah. And of course, until I go big in Switzerland or something like that, I get like 68 cents every couple of months.
I get royalties all the time. I get
dropped into my PayPal. I'm like, okay, I cannot buy anything with that.
My favorite one is I get Sirius XM checks from Sirius XM Comedy. Those are my favorite, because those are, I think I get like 26 cents or something. So.
There's other money going to other people. Absolutely. Somewhere down the deal. Yeah, you're getting just the last of it. So you talk about starting off and how you started off in ministry, and that's one of the things that I'm passionate about. I am now out of the paid youth ministry part. I am now into the senior pastor role, and one of the things that I am working with a lot is training of youth leaders and things. So one of the questions that I have for anybody, and it would be a little different when you started, but still, I think a lot of things are the same. You talked about networking. What else? What would have helped you the most now that you've done it for a while? When you look back and you go, I wish somebody would have given me curriculum, told me this, or whatever. Like, what are some of those things that?
Cat.
I see your cat. Your cat looks like my cat.
There you go. Yeah, he's chasing a bug.
Right now.
No,
your cat looks like nothing like my cat. The tail looks the same.
This is Turbo, by the way. But okay. So what would have I wish I had?
What would have helped you as you started off? Whether that's programming, or whether that's people, or just things that you knew like would have helped set you up even better.
I think really what would have set me off like into a better place was kind of having one of the biggest things that helped me was structure that people had. So it was kind of like, especially coming in completely green with, no sort of background in this game whatsoever, and going, okay, what are y'all doing Sunday nights, or what does this look like? So, and kind of having, or like, what's working well? Is small groups working well, And I've realized now that there's some churches that, you can try to preach to them and you could try to do the whole format there, but that's not going to sink in as well as immersive small groups. So it's kind of just learning your kids, but also having that structure there and learning what works for you, but kind of learning the different flavors and knowing that just because it works at one place doesn't mean it works for you. And that was really one of the biggest things. Was I would look at churches and I'd go, man, they're killing it. They have 200 kids there. But then that's not the same kind of direction I need to go with my kids.
So what were some of the things that what helped you determine what your kids were, or what would work with them?
I think a lot of it too was just the getting to know the kids in general, and also knowing your strengths. Now, I really want to say that too, is there's some youth directors in general, or youth pastors in general, who maybe your sermons aren't necessarily what the kids, it may feel like that's in your heart to go up there and preach and go, but at the same time, that's not the direction in which these kids are grasping onto, to where you realize that these kids are getting fed through a lot of conversation. So instead of spending that extra 10 minutes to go on stage and just try to blast a sermon in, why don't you take an extra 10 minutes and hang out after church service and hang out with this one kid in particular? And so it's almost like if you want to make a difference, then you can speak to a group. But if you want to make an impact, you speak to a person.
Wait, say that again.
It's like if you want to make a difference, if you want to make a difference, you speak to a group of people. But if you want to make an impact, you speak to a person.
I like that.
So
you can make a
there's your Hobby Lobby throw
T-shirt out of that, or bumper sticker, or put up, somebody can crochet that and put it in a deal. So we kind of started talking off when we were laughing about, you've had success in youth ministry. I've had success, and you've had things that weren't successful.
Absolutely.
So before we dive in, because I know that there's that youth group game you do where it's like, two positives and a negative. Yeah. So what were some of your moments you look back on your youth ministry and go, wow, that worked? And it may have been a program, or it may have been something like a whole ministry you set up, or whatever.
It goes back to Palestine. Now, when I was in Palestine, so when you're working in a small town, and this is helpful to anybody who may be listening that is a small town youth pastor. If you're in a small town youth pastor, collaborate with other youth pastors that are in your town. So doesn't matter the denomination, because at the end of the day, we all have the same goal. So I feel there's some youth pastors that look at other churches as competition. Everybody has that mentality, and it's not. We're playing for the same. We're all on Team Jesus here. So all of us youth pastors, when we were in Palestine one day, we all got together for a lunch, and we decided to sit down, and we decided to create an event. And we put together a DNOW event. Now, DNOW is typically a Baptist thing, but we decided to break barriers with it, and we made it a multi-denominational DNOW event. And so it was a big DNOW retreat weekend, and all of us and we went to lunch every week, and we had a DNOW planning meeting, and we all took it head on, and we put it together. And this was community wide. So, I mean, you got to think that all of the churches that had youth groups in this town got together. And by the end of it, we had over 500 kids come to this DNOW event. And it was a complete amazing thing, because it was just 6 or 7 youth pastors that got together saying, hey, what can we do with our kids? And there were so many lives that were changed at this event. And it was just so cool. Watching the typical, I guess, barriers get broken with it, because it wasn't, whenever I put on a DNOW as a Methodist, they're like, what? I'm like, no. I said, I'm brave. I said, we make it work. We're getting it in. And so I love the DNOW concept. And whenever our kids did the first one, they kept asking for more. So it just kind of became a thing with my kids. Was I brought in using a DNOW weekend as opposed to doing any sort of fun event or anything there, because the kids just got a lot out of it. And so it was really great just being a part of that. And that was a huge win for us, because it was a huge swing, and it was, can we work together? Can we all play well together? Well, wait, you're Methodist, you're Baptist, you're can we all play along and do this? And we hit it out of the park, and it was just an amazing thing.
Well, we had in Texarkana, we had Fields of Faith.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Fields of Faith, but that was kind of our thing that everybody came together for. We brought in Jared Hall, came in and did stuff one time, and other speakers, and that's the one I remember. The last one I think we did before the great shutdown of everything.
That's right.
And so, but it was the same thing. It was just one night. It was a Wednesday night, but we met for months ahead of time. And really, the thing I didn't like was we met for months ahead of time. We're like, oh yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to keep meeting. And then once the event happened, it was like we didn't meet. I mean, we met once to make sure we could, anybody who rededications or first time commitments to Christ or whatever. In our church, we got those kind of things, but after that, we didn't meet. So that was kind of sad. I always wish that we had. What's funny now is there's a pastor at the Church of Christ, I think in Humble, was a youth pastor in Texarkana when I was there.
Oh, cool.
He moved down. He moved down right about the same time I did. A little after I did, here to that. So what are some things that haven't gone well? And we don't just want to share what hasn't gone well. We also want to maybe look back and go, here's what I could have done, or here, the name of this section is mistakes I made so you don't have to.
Right.
So what are some of those? And I will share some too. Don't worry, it won't be just you. But,
oh no.
So if you're listening out there, first of all, know this: you're going to make mistakes.
100%.
You are going to mess up. You're going to put a hole in a wall and ruin carpet with candle wax because of the prayer stations. You are going to say the wrong thing. Hopefully you don't leave a child somewhere, but I have heard it happening. That's probably on the more end of, things you probably shouldn't do. And you may want to look for another church after that. You're going to do programs that bomb, but you learn things from those. So I just want to tell all those who are listening, that's the reality, and don't give up just because something fails. It doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. It just means that you're going to try again and keep going. So with that, I've got a couple, but Adrian, why don't you share, what are some of the things that you failed at, and then what did you learn from them, or how would you do them differently when you went back?
Kind of hit the nail on the head saying it's always going to happen. And I take pride in the fact that, the mistakes I've made have helped me get my battle scars in youth ministry. And looking back on them now, I can laugh. But I take pride that I've never left a kid anywhere. So, I mean, everywhere we've gone, I have a perfect track record with bringing people back. But the first biggest one, and this actually made another youth ministry podcast. Actually, they read it on there. It was great. But
was that the one where they're reading? The two guys are reading the
yes
youth ministry film. Oh, awesome! So you are family. We'll find that episode and send it to us after this, and we'll link it in there.
So it's but anyway. So here's what happened, and here's the full. They only read the snippet but going. I'll give you not the longer version, but the more extended. But so this is my first church already. So we went from comedy. The whole thing happened with the pastor. I'm in this church now, and I'm trying to figure out a way to start. So I'm like, okay, I need a good starting point. Where should we start? And they did have confirmands. So I was like, okay, here's a good starting place. Let's work with these confirmation kids. So 6th graders getting ready. And I'm like, man, all right. So I plan an event. This is October. No, it's about September going into October. Late September, October. And Helotes is Spanish for corn. So there's cornfields everywhere outside. And one of the big things that they do in Helotes is called the Carnival Festival. And it's a huge thing where it's a big outdoor festival and they have a corn maze. And so I was learning about the town. I was learning about the church. And I was like, you know what? Why don't I take my confirmands out to this corn maze so we can have a team building exercise? I said it'd be fun, it'd be lighthearted, get to know them, we'll work together. What a great way to make it work. I didn't do much research into this event, and so what had happened was I basically just texted the parents saying, hey, I'm going to take your kids to the corn maze. It'll be a good time and team building, blah, blah, blah. And okay, yeah, sure. Drop off your kids. So I pick a date, and this is also not doing any research about the corn maze. I just like, you know what? I have the church credit card. I'll pay for it, whatever. I'm in my mind. I'm like selfless. So I show up and I get these kids dropped off, and immediately once they get dropped off and in my possession, the parents leave. Parents don't care. They just leave it. And that's another thing I learned. No questions were asked. So this is already like, what's going on? So I have these 4 6th graders now who are just shy and timid. I don't know them. They don't really know me. So we're just kind of here awkwardly. And I'm getting stares by a bunch of people, and I'm so confused now. I'm like, okay, so we walk over to the corn maze. I go to the ticket window. I'm like, yeah, I need 5 for this corn maze. So it's 4 of them and me. And they're just like, are you the adult that's with them? I was like, yeah, no, I'm the adult. I'm good. And they're just like, okay. So they go and they run it through. And I didn't realize that this was an 18 and up haunted corn maze that they were doing that weekend. So it was like legit, like terrifying, like blood, guts, gore, everything. And so I was oblivious. So here I am hauling these little 6th graders with me, and we go in through the maze. And as soon as we get through, they kind of close, and there's people behind us now, and like there's no way of getting out. So as we start walking through, you get the 2 girls from The Shining or whatever it is, the 2 little twin girls that pop out and standing in the middle of the field, and these kids are just crying at this point. And this thing is an hour long. I mean, and not only is it just hurry up, let's just get through it. Not like a haunted house where you just keep moving straight. You're in a maze. So you back yourself up in a corner, and we're getting chased by people with chainsaws. We're getting like these kids halfway through are just crying, and I'm just holding them for dear life, like trying just to get out of this whole ordeal. And I mean, I'm trying so hard. I'm scared. So I mean, I'm trying to like hide my mouth, like my vulgarities that's coming out in the situation and everything like that. I mean, we are just fighting through this thing, and needless to say, we make it out. And I am just like, these kids are just crying. They're like, I want to call my mom. This is the worst. Like, and these were brave little 6th graders that I muscled through it with.
So this was your first event with these 6th graders?
Ever. Like, this is my, like, welcome to youth ministry. Like, and so what have you learned? I've learned to research your events and figure out, really, do your homework as to where you take these kids.
We had several things with that. One, and, you know, depending on who's out there and who your parents are, some of them are the opposite of that. Yeah. Some of them, parents won't let you take, you know, they're going to stay with you through your entire program on Wednesday night when you're sitting in church.
Absolutely.
and some are the opposite.
And these
that's one of the things
parents could have cared less. They just dumped. They probably had a date night somewhere. They're probably like, "Oh, great, yeah, cool." And it was like a Friday night. I mean, it was something just very I knew a red flag was kind of there were no other families there, like little kids. I mean, and I was getting all the stares with the little kids, and the ticket lady didn't help. I mean, there were so many red flags in the situation, and I was just like, but yeah, just kind of go with it.
So how did you, I mean, obviously the kids talked to their parents after that, and you were still in ministry. So like, how that process? Because I think that'd be an important lesson. Yeah. Like, if you mess up, like absolutely. You also have to know how to get out of that, or how to take responsibility and move forward.
Basically, this is the first lesson that I've learned, and this is good advice to everybody. Talk and be open with your senior pastors. They have your back, and the majority of them have been in youth ministry before. So not all of them, but the majority of them. So I called my senior pastor. That was the first thing, going, "Hey, I messed up." And I kind of told her the situation, and she was laughing, by the way. But she was beside herself, and she says, "Are you serious? This actually happened?" I said, 100%. And she says, "Okay." She says, "Don't panic." She says, I'm gonna go ahead and draft up an email to help you draft up an email to go to these parents." And so we thought about an email to draft up to the parents, and it was really, I had to swallow my pride and make some phone calls going, "Hey, I'm sorry." I'm like, it was kind of such a terrible movie reference here, but I'm like, it's kind of like Joe Dirt. I was like, I'm new, I don't know what to do. And it really was. I was so green into youth ministry that I didn't think anything of it and where I took them. But my senior pastor really helped bail me out of it. And swallow your pride. Sometimes it's not worth. It's not worth trying to argue over. You messed up, take ownership in it. And the kids, after a few bits of therapy, they were okay. So.
Well, I mean, I think that's a huge thing. And we have a couple of podcasts talking about, dealing with your senior pastor and things like that. But as a senior pastor, and as a senior pastor now with a child in the youth group, which is a new world for me. So like, I mean, we can help with some of those things. Like when you do mess up, if you're a youth leader and you mess up, like keeping your senior pastor informed, helps, because one, they may be able to smooth some things over, or they know the channels and the steps to take with that church. Because I think that's a key too, is in some churches, it may not be, it may be somebody over here who they know they have a history with haunted houses, and they don't know why you're going to a haunted house to begin with. And that the word is going to get out and go to them. Like, so your senior pastor can, one is just a respect for them. Like, but if you call them, let them know what's going on, preferably before something happens, or immediately after something happens, somebody gets hurt, or you end up going someplace and you realize that you're going to be chased by people in the corn maze. I mean, that is probably worth the cost of the podcast, because I know that's not always the case.
Yeah, and
the podcast is free, but other than that,
it's
I know that's not always the case.
No, absolutely not. But yeah, lesson learned. I mean, that to this day is probably one of the biggest, looking back in my youth ministry tenure, and that was right out of the gate. That was like first few months in youth ministry. That's your big welcome, So.
Was that when you went to other churches, or you continued? How did that lesson kind of help? Or some things that you automatically put in place as here's one of my rules for youth ministry, and you went forward.
Yeah, definitely now is I have to definitely know where I'm taking these kids. So ever since after that moment, it wasn't one of those things like, I've never done this before, so or I've never, another helpful thing too, and that I suggest also, is if you take kids to like movie theaters, is like, go watch the movie before you decide to take kids. So I mean, something like that, so it made me a lot more conscientious over where we went or what we were doing. So basically, if I invited kids like, hey, let's go to the movie, I acted like I'd never seen it before. But in reality, I just wanted to make sure it was all kosher and that I didn't have to have a parent conversation later to totally save my bacon there. So that was a big eye-opening experience as to really what steps you take or kind of how to plan your outings and retreats a little better.
I'll share. This was not my retreat that I went on, but I was a music person for this retreat. But I was at my home church in Pearland, and they went on a retreat. And the whole theme was Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh, God.
Great story, great deal. Like, you can think great, all sorts of theological points and stuff. And so the youth director did. I won't give their name out, but they did go through and preview the movie, the 1950s or whatever it was, Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie. And they sent their spouse to go pick up the movie on the Friday before we left. And they picked up the 1990 or 1980 version of the movie. And so we're watching this movie clip. And all of a sudden you see an alien in all of her glory. Yep. And the youth director freaks out and jumps up and stands in front of the screen to block it, but it's a projector, so it's not going to block it.
It just goes right through.
And then the alien is projected straight on the youth director. But yes, I mean that would be a huge thing. Is know what movie, like you said. I mean, even if watch the movie ahead of time, because also you're going to know your kids, right? You're going to know. I'm taking senior high. I'm going to take this, or I'm taking the kid. Yeah. I'm taking this kid. A friend of mine who was going on a trip, and he made a joke. He was like, "Hey, we're going to watch the new Pirates of the Caribbean movie. It's rated R." Well, he made that joke. Yeah. Then he put the movie in. It's like PG-13, PG something. That would have been no problem. But there was a kid in the back who was crying because his parents wouldn't let him watch rated R movies.
Oh, yeah.
And so just that joke had that impact. So you never know what impact what you say, and knowing your kids and knowing those things. So that would have been another fail. Would have been not just showing the movie, but and it wasn't a huge thing, but still something misspoken or not understanding or whatever like that could have changed that trip for that kid, or wouldn't have that experience, or we wouldn't have the story to talk about.
Absolutely. Nate Bargatze does this really great bit in his new stand-up routine about how his parents were really devoted Christians, and they kind of blocked what he was watching and stuff, and they wouldn't let him watch things that were inappropriate. And so he ended up going to a sleepover for a birthday party at his friend's house, and they were going to watch a rated R movie. And he basically stood up in front of all the guys going, "Yeah, this is not appropriate. I can't watch this. My parents won't let me." And the mom at this, she's like trying to make him feel a little better and not let him be embarrassed by any of the kids or anything like that. She's like, "Well, just don't tell your parents that, we watched this movie, okay?" And he's like, "Oh, that's too late. They're mad. They're on their way." He called him up. He's like, "Oh, they got a word with you." But
well, that brings up other points from fails. Like, everybody has a cell phone. Mm-hmm. So I think this episode is turning into, hey, here are the things to watch out for, and to realize. So everybody has a cell phone. They can call. So when you go to camp or something like that, or something happens,
absolutely,
most likely your parents are going to know before you're able to call them.
Sure.
And so that's something to keep in mind. The other thing that a friend of mine ran into was they had Life 360 on the bus. Well, not a problem, because the kid's riding the bus, right? Well, the parent looks on Life 360 and realizes the bus is going like 80 miles an hour or whatever. Those are things to keep in mind, is that no longer are the days where you go off to camp and you come back and you tell the stories. It's like those stories are known, those events are known, and cell phones change a lot of that. And I think it's good, but you have to be careful. There are things that will trip you up that you don't think about.
Just to add on to that, just because I had this experience at camp this past summer, just for anybody that's in youth ministry, knowing Life 360 is not always accurate. I got phone calls from parents going, where the heck is my kid? Like, and I'm like, they're right here. And they're like, well, it has them in Alvin, Texas, and we're not even anywhere. I mean, like, I was like, there's churches here from Alvin, but I'm like, but no, like I said, there's nobody that took their phone. I said the kid has their phone, and so yeah, just those parents that hover over Life 360. It's a great app. I'm not against it by no means, but just don't take do research on where your kid is before and check in. Don't just look at that and assume.
Yeah, and that's something to talk to parents too and go, hey, and that all comes down to trust. And one thing I told, we have a new youth director here with me. And I did a workshop a couple of weeks ago for one of the youth ministry summits in Livingston. And I was leading them. I said, one of the main things you can do is build trust.
Absolutely.
Because if you have trust with your parents and with your pastor and your church, then a lot of these little things aren't issues. They're like, oh, I know they're with Adrian and wherever he is at camp. They don't automatically think what's going on or whatever like that. If you have trust, and the other thing is trust comes through time. Like you starting off obviously this is not the conversation for you because your parents just dropped your kids off the first day they knew you. But in the other 99.9% of the cases, trust comes with time.
Sure.
You're going to have a different level of trust after 3 years than you are after 6 months.
100%.
You have a different level of trust after 7 years and 10 years than you are even after 3 years. And with all the fails we've talked about, I think that's an important thing is that's the most important thing you can do. Yes, share the gospel. Yes, bring others to Christ. But the thing that buys you those opportunities, if your kids aren't there because parents don't trust you, or they don't go to the retreat or whatever like that, because there's not trust, and that's in you and that's in your volunteers now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, like 100%. So, but yeah, those are things that we just pick up and learn along the way. The other thing in youth ministry too is the fact that it is okay, and this was hard for me too. Is I always felt like especially coming in from stand-up comedy into one world into a completely other world, and one of the best bits of advice I learned, and it was actually Doug Fields that told me this personally, which was very helpful. But he mentioned, he's like, sometimes it is okay just to say that you don't know. He says that, there's so many people that try to get their feet wet in youth ministry, and they feel like they just that they want to just cram this entire manual down their brains of what to do in every situation, or, or how to answer every question. And you should just be programmed into this perfectly cut out youth ministry piece. And it's not like churches have these ideas that they have this visual of what they want in a youth minister, and you need to fit every single criteria, or it's not, they try to carve it out. But in reality, there's always got to be room for a humanistic side. And that's something that I feel people need to know also, is that you're going back to those fails, that you're gonna make mistakes, but also don't feel, definitely learn from them, definitely apply them. I'm not saying that, but definitely know that they can continue to happen because you're human. You've got that approach, but also too is that if a kid comes up, don't feel like you need to just have it on you. Is that if you get challenged with something, just go, you know what, man, I don't know, but let's talk through this, or let's get through this together. Like, come back to me next week with that question, and let's, kind of go from there. So that was that trial and error learning phase that I had.
And what I was thinking when you said that is, obviously you have those where it was the Bible question, or you're in small groups or something like that. But like, I don't know too, is when your parents come to you, because they're going to come to you and say, hey, my kid's dealing with this. And you can be like, me, I am just now. So I've done youth ministry for 30 years. I just kind of have to cough a little bit when I say that. But, I started in 94 doing youth ministry.
I was 3, by the
And
way. I just want to throw that out there.
well, so what's funny is a little side note. I was at church. I was at Lakeview Church Camp this past summer, speaking for our mid-high camp. And I said, I've been doing youth ministry for, so many years, since 93 or 94. Said, I don't know how many years that is. And one of my pastor friends goes, I do. I was like, he goes, it's blah, blah, blah. I was born then. I was like,
there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping me realize where all these gray hairs come from and the no hair comes from.
You know what? It's age. You're aging great. So
wisdom. But, starting off, I'm doing youth ministry and I have, 12, 13, 14, 15 through 18 year olds. I'm 19, 20 myself. And so I don't know, I know kind of a little bit what they're going through because I was just going through it. But then you get into where you're 25, 26 and you're kind of separated. You're older than they are by a good bit, but you're not in that realm, but you don't have kids yet. So I know nothing about parenting a teenager except for the experience I've had with other parents and other teenagers. I'm known from those experiences. Now I'm just now getting that, I'm dealing with the, when do you give your kid a cell phone question? I'm dealing with the, how much is too much with committed? And so it's interesting because now I'm probably going to have to eat some of my words and go back and go, oh, I swore I would never do that, but here I am. And it's to other youth leaders, or other parents and stuff.
And 100%. And, people always, one of the things I had to say I don't know to is recently is just, how do we get the kids in here? We're supposed to have some magic formula, and right now, if you would ask me, what is the greatest, so here's my cheap plug for any church that wants to win over youth right now. How do you get the kids in there? Offer travel ball scholarships or something, because apparently that's where everybody is. So instead of giving out college scholarships, don't do that. Offer them money for them to go play baseball and whatnot, because that's what they're all doing, and that's what everybody's competing with right now. So,
yeah, and again, that's knowing your group, and that's then we do have a good episode. This one of the first seasons, I think, talking about sports and either battling or how do you partner with, or I thought one group team I saw, this is a side note for the conversation, but one church that did, they went and they went to the ball field and they sponsored one of the Pee Wee or Little League or T-ball leagues, and they sponsored them, and so then they were out at the fields every night
to do it. That's the way to go.
And doing that, so that's a you got to find those ways to do that, but you're not going to have all the answers. But I think my original point was you're not going to have the answers for the Bible study question, but you're also not going to have all the answers for your church. How do we do this? I don't know. We're going to figure it out. You don't have all the answers for your parents. You don't have all the answers for your senior pastor. And if you try to make those up or pretend like you know them, then that's a challenge as well. So I don't know, but I'll find out, or I don't know, but I'm working on that, or I don't know, but we're focusing on this right now are probably good ways to go.
Absolutely. 100%. So you live, learn, and continue to learn. So there's no placement in there that's gonna be perfect. Because even
what
when
else?
You're old, wise,
what else?
What's up?
As I say, what else? Any other bits of wisdom? We're going to wrap up here in a minute, but other bits of wisdom, thoughts, comments from your vast, being in different youth ministries.
Yeah. I think too. Let's see. Ask the kids what feeds them. That's been a really big thing to me. I really think. Make it their own. I've had a lot of kids that had come, it got to the point where I was always so busy on the kids need this, or this is what we got to do. And in reality, there was one day where I had a kid just come up to me and say, hey, can we try doing this one day? And I said, you know what? Sure, let's do that. And they said, man, it changed the dynamic of youth group. And it was so much cleaner and it worked out so much better. So listen to them because it's theirs, and it's theirs, and God, God's the one that really that really pieces everything together. But its design is for that. So, and something else is the mindset too, is that our youth are not the church of tomorrow. They're the church of today. So people have this mentality that these kids gotta, when they get older, you've got to prepare them. It's like, no, it's like we got to worry about them right now, and the decisions they're making. That's huge. It's the decisions they make now are going to impact their tomorrow, but the decisions they make now is what builds your church of today. So.
Yeah. And we have a whole podcast on this with a friend of mine, but keeping that mindset and that they are the church of today, so they need leadership in the church of today. Whether that's committees or things like that, or whether that's ushering or serving communion, whatever that is, whatever way they can be plugged in. I think we do a disservice when we take our kids and keep them over in the youth center all the time for worship and Sunday school and everything, and then they graduate and they have no idea we wonder why they won't be in their main service. Well, they haven't been there for 18 years.
There's some that don't even know their senior pastor's face, because they don't go, they spend their time in Sunday school and then they go to youth group. And, I've had senior pastors walk in to youth group before. None of the kids knew who it was because of that reason. So.
And that would be a word for any senior pastors or any youth directors who are going on to be senior pastors.
That's right.
I don't know that it's a promotion. I think it's a demotion or a lateral move in some cases. But
you can just be a cool
or for youth leaders to or for youth leaders to make sure you are contacting your senior, because sometimes a senior pastor may not think that they are cool enough to go over to the youth.
That's right.
And I can see that. You have somebody who doesn't have any connection with youth, or maybe retired pastor who's come in, like they may think that the youth don't want them over there. And so what can you do as a youth leader to invite them, find ways where they feel comfortable and you feel comfortable?
Yes.
Find something they're interested in or whatever like that. So that way they know, and they're not a stranger in that area. So, well, we could probably go on and share fail stories for hours and hours. But for those of you did mention comedy, and that's how you got started. And you said you're still doing that.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna give you just a little bit of time to tell us about that, your shameless plug time, because I'm sure you would not only do shows, but I'm sure you would go to any of these guys who are listening to churches,
absolutely.
For a D-Now or something like that as well. So tell us about what you're doing.
I do speak, and I have one amazing sermon, and that's it. So just don't book me for multiple days. Book me for one, and it's
right.
Yeah, you'll get kids rededicating their lives to Christ for the 5th time, whatever. Their rededication on their dedications. But no, I do speak at events. I'm available for any of that. I charge a lot more for comedy than I do for sermons. I just want to let y'all know that. As much as I would love to come and tell jokes, it comes with a price tag. But for you, it'd be a good one. So I definitely love performing, love telling jokes. I've got a new special I'm performing right now, and it's called DIY Husband is what it is right now, and it's great. I'm excited about it. It's a lot of my marriage material now, because that's been a new phase of my life. And talking about my ex-fiance, who is now my wife. So, but you get that? See what I did there? My ex. She gets so mad when I call her my ex-fiance. She's like, hey, I'm your wife. But anyway, but yeah, so just doing life, and it's great. I've got, I do corporate gigs. So I've got a corporate gig coming up for the Alzheimer's Association. I'm a national spokesperson for the Alzheimer's Association. So a portion of all of the comedy shows that I do get donated towards the Alzheimer's Association for Alzheimer's research in benefits of my grandmother. But yeah, I've got a lot of that going on. Feel free, and you can contact me on Facebook. You can find me on if you want to listen to any old comedy clips, you can. They're ancient. But I would wait for the new stuff, because it's going to be super exciting, and you can book it and hear it all. So.
All right. Awesome. And I assume if you come and do a sermon, it's not going to be deadpan. Like you're going to have comedy included in that.
Yeah,
it's just kind of, yeah. Okay. Your one sermon. All right. Yeah.
My one.
So,
everybody's got that one that you're just like,
So I have one of my youth who texts me every time. She's now graduated. She's actually been on the podcast talking about youth assistance and things, but she graduated, she's gone on. But anytime she hears a sermon on Peter walking on the water, she texts me because that was my, as a youth director, I didn't have to have that many sermons. I had a couple, you had some talks, but you really didn't have a sermon. And that was like my one thing was Peter walking on the water. And stepping out and noticing the wind and the waves, and the whole joke in there is when he didn't sink until he noticed the winds and the waves.
Yeah.
And I talk about Wile E. Coyote, putting his feet over the edge he runs off the cliff and he doesn't fall until he notices that he can't be doing what he is doing.
For sure.
And so that's my one. But she texts me every time she hears that and says, "Wile E. Coyote."
Mine is Mary and Martha. So I mean, talk about the two sisters, and the sermon title is called "Left on Red," and how whenever we try to communicate with God, that we leave God on red sometimes when God tries to communicate with us. And
so if you're listening to this too, like you just have two scriptures and a main topic of each of those, so you can take those and go with those. So. Well, Adrian, it was great to talk to you. Glad you were here, and prayers for you with whatever's next in your life. And I want to remind everybody else listening, thank you for listening. I hope that you will contact Adrian if you need one sermon,
shameless plug. That's it.
Or if you have, but also if you have questions about anything we talked about or experiences, if it's starting off in a small church. I mean, I'm sure at least a Facebook Messenger conversation or something like that, and he could help you out there. So find him on
Happy
Facebook.
To help.
That's a great place to connect with him.
Absolutely.
And if you continue to listen here, and if you go on to the website, you may probably listening to this on Spotify or iTunes or something like that. Apple Podcast. Excuse me. I think they don't like calling iTunes podcast. So Apple Podcast or whatever. If you will go on over to studentministryconversations.org. We have show notes. We have links. Adrian's going to send us some links and stuff like that for us to put in there, and a picture for him. And we'll put all that on there, and you can check out all of our other episodes and as well. And if you like this or any of the podcast, make sure and share them at Talk Student Men. Tag us on all the socials, including Twitter or X or whatever it's now called. Yeah, we're not on MySpace. We do have a little bit of a presence on Threads. We kind of introducing that and seeing. We have a presence on Twitter, X, or whatever that's called now.
Is that really okay?
Facebook, Facebook and Instagram are probably the best ways though. That's probably the two key ways that have stayed stable throughout all this. So follow us. Brent is going to hate me for this episode because it's so random. So I apologize to Brent Aiken. And David Pruitt, who also are a host, and you've heard from one of them last week, and you'll hear from another one of them this week. We alternate about every 3 weeks with a new episode. So we are dropping one every Thursday. So y'all have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.